The hallway outside the apartment was dim and narrow, lit by a single flickering bulb that buzzed softly like it was struggling to stay awake. Rain tapped relentlessly against the windows at the end of the corridor, each drop echoing through the quiet building. Inside apartment 3B, the door shook again, harder this time, its loose hinge screeching in protest. The sound made the little girl flinch. She sat on the floor hugging her knees, watching her mother press her back against the door as if her small body could somehow hold the night outside at bay. Her mother's hands trembled, knuckles white, breath shallow. She tried to smile, but fear leaked through her eyes no matter how hard she tried to hide it. "It's okay," her mother whispered, though her voice cracked. "It's just the wind." But the little girl knew better. She had seen the screws fall out one by one, heard the wood groan, felt the cold air sneak through the cracks. She had also seen her mother cry quietly in the kitchen earlier, wiping her face before turning around, pretending everything was fine. Tonight, that pretending wasn't working. The door rattled again, and her mother gasped, pressing harder, tears slipping down her cheeks. That was the moment something shifted inside the child. Fear was still there, but love stepped in front of it. She stood up, her bare feet cold against the floor, and picked up a loose screw lying near the wall. It felt heavy in her tiny palm, like proof that something was wrong. She walked to her mother and looked up at her, eyes wide and serious. "Mommy," she said softly, "I'll be right back." Before her mother could stop her, she slipped into the hallway. The air outside felt colder, lonelier. The girl walked slowly to the next door, each step filled with doubt. What if no one answered? What if she got in trouble? She raised her hand anyway and knocked, 3 small, careful taps. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the door opened. A tall man stood there, surprise flickering across his face. He looked tired, his tie loosened, dark circles beneath his eyes like he hadn't slept much lately. Behind him, the apartment was neat but quiet, the kind of quiet that belonged to someone who lived alone. He looked down at the little girl, confused but attentive. She lifted her hand, showing him the screw. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. "Can you fix our door?" she asked. "Mommy's scared." The words hit him harder than any accusation ever could. He glanced past her, hearing the door rattle again from inside her apartment, hearing the fear that adults tried so hard to hide. Without asking who they were or why they needed help, he reached for his coat. Then he paused, turned back, and grabbed a small toolbox from the closet. "It's okay," he said gently, kneeling to her level. "Let's go take a look." As they walked toward her apartment together, the rain grew louder outside, but for the first time that night, the little girl felt something stronger than fear. She felt hope walking beside her, carrying a toolbox, answering a midnight knock. Inside the apartment, the air felt tight, as though fear had soaked into the walls. The mother stepped away from the door the moment the man entered, embarrassed by how desperately she had been holding it shut. She smoothed her hair with shaking hands and apologized at least twice before he could even set his toolbox down. Her voice carried the weight of exhaustion, the kind that came from too many nights of worrying alone. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she said, eyes lowered. "I didn't know what else to do." The man didn't answer right away. He was already kneeling, examining the damaged hinge, fingers brushing over the splintered wood as if it were something fragile instead of broken. The little girl hovered nearby, clutching the hem of her mother's sweater. She watched him intently, wide-eyed, as though every movement mattered. He spoke calmly, almost casually, explaining what he was doing in simple words she could understand. "The hinge is loose," he said. "But it's fixable. Doors get tired sometimes." That made her smile just a little. Doors getting tired sounded less scary than doors breaking. As he worked, the sounds of metal clicking and screws tightening slowly replaced the rattling that had filled the room earlier. The wind still howled outside, but it no longer felt like it could reach them. The mother stood frozen at first, unsure whether to help or stay out of the way. Then she noticed how steady his hands were, how patient his movements seemed. Something inside her loosened. She sank onto the couch, pressing a hand to her chest, breathing for the first time in what felt like hours. The man noticed the thin blanket folded beside her, the stack of unopened letters on the small table, the flickering heater that barely warmed the room. He didn't comment. He didn't ask questions. But his eyes took everything in, quietly. When the little girl brought him a glass of water, filled almost to the brim, he thanked her as if she had handed him something precious. "You're very brave," he told her. She straightened instantly, pride shining through the fear. The final screw slid into place with a soft, satisfying sound. He tested the door once, then twice. It didn't move. No rattle. No groan. Just solid silence. The room felt different immediately, as if safety itself had settled in. "It's secure now," he said gently. "It won't do that again." The mother stood, eyes glistening. She pressed her hand over her mouth, overwhelmed by relief she hadn't allowed herself to feel before. "Thank you," she whispered. It wasn't just gratitude in her voice, it was disbelief. The man wiped his hands on a cloth and shrugged lightly, as if this were nothing at all. But as he looked at the little girl smiling up at him and the mother standing taller than she had minutes before, he realized this midnight repair had fixed more than just a door. He packed his tools slowly, giving the quiet a moment to settle, as if he didn't want to rush the feeling of safety back out the door with him. The little girl sat cross-legged on the floor now, humming softly, no longer watching the door with suspicion. The mother followed him to the entryway, still holding herself as though fear might return if she let go too soon. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, voice low, careful not to wake the night again. "I can pay you when I get my next check. I promise." He shook his head immediately. "No," he said gently, firm in a way that left no room for argument. From his pocket, he pulled out a simple business card. No bold title, no flashy logo, just his name and a phone number. He knelt and handed it to the little girl instead of her mother, tapping the number with his finger. "If the door ever makes a sound that scares you," he said softly, "you knock on my door. Any time. Even if it's midnight again." The girl nodded solemnly, gripping the card like a treasure. "Okay," she whispered, then added, "Thank you for making Mommy not scared." The words tightened something in his chest. He smiled, brushed a hand over her hair, and stood. Days later, the sound of heavy tools returned, but this time in daylight. A crew arrived with a brand new door, stronger locks, and a heater replacement. The mother stood frozen in the hallway as instructions were given, her name already on the paperwork. She didn't understand until one of the workers mentioned the order came from the owner of the building's neighboring company. That night, she looked up her neighbor's name and felt embarrassment rush through her, followed by something warmer. He hadn't helped because he was powerful. He had helped because he was present. When she finally saw him again, she tried to apologize for not knowing who he was. He waved it off easily. "You didn't need to," he said. "You needed help. That's all that mattered." For the little girl, life returned to simple things. She slept through storms without waking. She stopped checking the door before bed. Sometimes she'd smile at it, remembering the night it stopped being scary. In her mind, the man next door wasn't a CEO or anything extraordinary. He was just the neighbor who answered when she knocked, the one who showed up when fear was loud and hope was quiet. And every time the door closed smoothly after that, it reminded them all that kindness, when it arrives at the right moment, can change everything.